I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're very pleased to be talking to the new executive director of the Memphis Botanic Garden, MaryLynn Mack. So stay with us for a conversation with MaryLynn. MaryLynn, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
And welcome to Memphis. You came in August?
August. I have a whopping 3 months under my belt.
That's great. Well, we'll circle back to that, about how Memphis is going. But we'll talk really about Memphis Botanic Garden. And for some people, they've been going for decades. Some people haven't been maybe in years. Maybe they used to go with their kids, but they haven't. Now their kids are older. For you, with your new you've been in this work, and we'll talk about your past at other botanic gardens. But what do you say to people? Like, why? What is Memphis Botanic Garden, and for people who don't know?
Well, for people that know and don't know, I feel like I liken it to your third place in your city. I always think about arts and culture and how necessary it is for a city to be thriving. A lot of people don't think of a garden as a cultural institution, but we truly are. And so I like people to think of this as their third place. You've got work, you've got home, and you have your botanic garden. There's so much going on right now in terms of going into the holidays, tons of activities. What do you want to highlight real quick, and we'll circle back to some of them? Well, what I want to highlight is the thing I'm most excited about, because the day after Thanksgiving, we open Holiday Wonders.
Okay.
And for those that have been to the garden before, it really is a tradition. People love to come with their families. There's lights, there's music, there's food and drinks. And it's just a wonderful space to kind of, bring in the holiday cheer. So day after Thanksgiving, and it runs select nights through December 28th. And there's really something for everybody.
You got into this work. Your previous gig was in, what was it? I'm going to say it wrong. Palos Verdes,
Peninsula, LA.
Yeah. So 5 years-ish down there, South Coast Botanic Garden. Then before that, you were at the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix.
Right.
You have a thing for botanic gardens?
I have a thing for botanic gardens. And I never would have dreamed that I would have been in this line of work, because I'm not a gardener per se.
Yeah.
I've learned to be, and I've learned a lot about horticulture. I like to say I'm a Jeopardy champion. I can go 6 levels down, but don't ask me anything past that.
Right.
But I love it because it's not just a garden. It's a space, and gardens range anywhere from 3 acres to 200 acres. Out of the 700 that are through the United States. Memphis Botanic Garden is considered a large garden, 96 acres. And you can do a lot in 96 acres, way more than just nature. Although we lead with that, we've got concerts, we've got activities for kids, we have school tours, we have programs for adults. Yeah. So it's a space that can bring everything to you.
And staying back in time, how did you first get into this?
How did I get into it? Well, I had my degree in business. And so I decided I was going to go corporate America, do my thing there.
Yeah.
And realized that it wasn't feeding my spirit. I was always a volunteer. I volunteered at countless places. And I realized quickly that in order for me to feed my soul and give back and serve and still have a job that pays the bills, I could go into some type of nonprofit. So I started in Health and Human Services, running a women and children's center. And in that center, some of the things we did was we took the kids to museums and to garden spaces. And so then I fell in love with those spaces and decided, kind of done doing this. Let me go into a different field. And I was at the San Diego Natural History Museum.
Okay.
When I moved from California to Arizona, I thought, I'll just go back into museums, Wasn't the same landscape as it was in San Diego with Balboa Park and everything. And I found the Desert Botanical Garden. I thought, wow, how cool is this? It's like a museum outside. And I was hooked after that.
And all of these have been nonprofits, or are some of them extensions of a city park system? Or
they're all nonprofits. Gardens are kind of nested in different ways. Some of them are connected to universities. Some of them are private estates that maybe a wealthy family bequeathed to a group to run it as a garden. And others are like Memphis Botanic Garden, where we're on city property, and the city's very supportive in the fact that they want us to run the best garden ever. And, they will make sure that they take care of the space that we're in.
That's the thing I think people lose track of with lots of the parks and public spaces in Memphis. So not just Memphis Botanic Garden. Overton Park is a conservancy on top of city property. Shelby Farm, same thing, a conservancy. Memphis River Parks is not a conservancy so much, but it's a kind of separate entity. And it has pros and cons, I assume. You're new to Memphis, but on the one hand, you have this independence, but also you don't just have an influx of tax money that pays all the bills, right? So you've got all this back to your business background. It's a business, right? It just doesn't throw off a profit necessarily.
Yeah, nonprofit's just a tax status is what I like to say. And that's the nice partnership, is that we're on city property. But in terms of the programming and all of the things that happen in the garden, that's the foundation piece. That's what I run. And it's very true that, the city has a lot of things that it needs to take care of. So we are really pride ourselves on the fact that our programming and the things that we've built at the garden space allow us to basically, pay the bills with admissions, with people joining as members, but we rely very, very heavily on donations and really generous funders.
Yeah. In terms of other activities coming up, people think of lots of things. They think of Live at the Garden. That's not necessarily a winter thing. They think of the Memphis Fest. There's a food and wine festival. Other stuff that when you were applying for the job and then got the job, you looked with all the events that are going on that you were like, wow, that's an interesting one that you didn't expect.
Well, I definitely did not expect Live at the Garden. Lots of gardens have concert series, but there's concerts and then there's Live at the Garden.
Yeah.
Because we just outrate anything else going on out there with the acts that we bring in and the beautiful space that we have at the Radiance Amphitheater. So that was an unexpected surprise. But for all intents and purposes, gardens have a lot of the same kind of programming. One of the things that I was really excited about when I took this job is I feel like my experience in my last two gardens has now culminated into exactly what Memphis Botanic Garden needed. I really am very lucky that I've got to experience putting together very innovative programming with teams over the course of my 20 years in gardens. And so I'm really excited to bring that to Memphis. We've had exhibitions. A couple years ago, we had Alice in Wonderland, which is a huge traveling exhibit that goes from garden to garden, but we were really lucky to get it. And this coming spring, we have another renowned artist, Thomas Dambo, who's going to be bringing trolls. And I'm super excited about that. Because
literally a gasp from Natalie Van Gundy, mother of a small child. So
it is going to be a blast.
Apparently that's a winner right there.
It is a winner because Thomas is really known for conservation messaging. So these giant trolls are all made out of reclaimed wood pallets.
Oh, yeah.
But they're pretty magical. And it's a fairy tale. There's 6 young trolls that are coming to save the humans. So there's a real message in each one. And I think kids are obviously going to be wowed by it, but it's pretty cool for adults too.
And that's in the spring.
Yes, spring, as I like to say, a very Instagrammable moment. So I want to encourage everybody to come out and see them. Pretty cool.
That's very cool. Again, we're here with MaryLynn Mack. She's the new executive director of the Memphis Botanic Garden. We'll talk more about other upcoming events. We'll talk about just her background. But I'll take a minute here and remind everyone this is The Sidebar. I'm Eric Barnes. The Sidebar airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. Focused on the community, arts, culture, and everything in between. But it's not just a radio show. It's one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Memphis Grizzlies podcast with Drew Hill and Chris Harrington. The Memphis Tigers podcast is back with John Martin, Parth, and Frank. And Sound Bites, which is hosted by Jennifer Chandler, our food writer. That one also airs on WYXR every Thursday at 11, right before The Sidebar. We also host the podcast version of the Behind the Headlines, the TV show we do every week with the folks over at WKNO. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get these WYXR shows, that's Sound Bites and The Sidebar, on the WYXR app, or you can go to WYXR.org. And that includes all the WYXR shows, the talk shows, the music shows, archives of all of that. So it's a great way to keep up with WYXR. Also, if you haven't, consider becoming a supporter of WYXR. It's nonprofit, listener-supported radio. You can become a member. You can do a one-off donation. If you become a member, you get all kinds of benefits and fun stuff. go to wyxr.org or the app, and you can learn all about that. And lastly, if you're not a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian, do consider becoming one. We are a nonprofit newsroom, very much reliant on subscriptions and advertising, as well as donations. And many of you have probably seen a bunch of donation campaigns going out right now through year end as we support all the work that we do. Coming up soon in the coming weeks on Sidebar, Jeff Hewlett, a friend of the show, is coming on to talk about, Jeff does many things, but he's coming on to talk about music and the music he produces, which will be great. We also have Anthony Young with Epicenter coming on soon. Recently, we had George Abbott, who's very much now at Memphis River Parks Partnership. He was at Memphis River Parks Partnership. He is now at the Hyde Foundation, which obviously is very much into the kind of public spaces that MaryLynn is talking about. George and I talked about Civic Commons and a big program nationally and very much in Memphis about the importance of spaces, as MaryLynn was just talking about. We also recently had David Yancey. He's an artist, a tattoo artist. He's opening a lounge up on Broad Avenue. He was great. And I mentioned behind the headlines, we recently had Bakara Malden with MATA on the show. It was a lot of questions about what's going on with MATA. And I appreciate very much that Bakara came on. She's the interim CEO. And there's a lot going on with MATA and a lot of questions to be asked and a lot of challenges that are many years and decades in the making. We also had Doug McGowan on the show recently from the MLGW. We also had a show on charter schools trying to deal with the national problem of chronic absenteeism. This week on Behind the Headlines, right after Thanksgiving, we've got a show on access to justice with West Tennessee Legal Services, a really great woman from the Bar Association who does a lot of work with people who don't have lawyers and need lawyers. Again, that's this week on Behind the Headlines on WKNO. Last but not least, coming up on December 5th at 3 p.m. at, believe it or not, the Memphis Botanic Garden is our last of the year business seminars, commercial real estate. Rick Shadyak from ALSAC will be there to talk about all the huge construction and development and investment that they are making in downtown on their campus. We'll also have an overview of the industry of, everything from warehouses to multifamily to offices. It's a really, even if you're not in the industry, it's a really great business overview of what's going on in Memphis, what might be coming down the road. That is, again, December 5th at 3 p.m. Go to Eventbrite and search for Daily Memphian, or you can go to the Daily Memphian site, go to the navigation, and choose events. But we are here with MaryLynn Mack, the executive director as of August at the Memphis Botanic Garden. In terms of, I think just pulled from the website, 260,000 visitors a year to the garden, 40,000 of them are children. You look at that number and do you say, oh, we need to double that? Do you say we need to see incremental growth in that? I mean, it's not just about the numbers, but what's behind when you look at that number. Do you say, hey, there's more people we can expose to the garden, there's more revenue we can generate, there's more programming we can do for other people who aren't coming, or what?
Yes. So one of the things that I was super excited about when I took this job is the opportunity that Memphis Botanic Garden has. Like I said, 96 acres, and we just scratched the surface. And it's interesting to say it that way because we're over 70 years old. But we just hit our stride. And what I mean by that is I've had a lot of experience with gardens, and I'm on the board of the American Public Gardens Association. So that basically represents all gardens and arboreta in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So I've been really lucky that I've seen a lot of those gardens. And what I'm able to see is that for a city of Memphis' size, we have a lot more work to do. We want to open up this garden to be able to serve the entire community. One of the things that I also was lucky enough to be involved in is the IDEA committee. And IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. And the gardens across the United States kind of took on the charge to look at gardens specifically and look at the cities they were in and say, okay, how do we serve more? How do we serve everyone better? How do we make sure that everyone knows that this is a space that belongs to them? And so I'm really excited to do that work with the team at Memphis Botanic Garden to be sure that we have programming, we have art, we have all sorts of things happening that can really embrace the whole city that's Memphis. So yes, I want to increase attendance. And I also think that there are a lot of families in particular that don't understand the benefit of being a member.
Okay.
You can join and have a membership for what really pays for itself in 2.5 visits. But you can come every day if you want to. And I see a lot of young families that come and they bring their little ones. They go to My Big Backyard, which is a wonderful children's space in the garden. And where else are you going to get a green space like that has innovative programming, hands-on immersive experiences in a really safe place? So I really want to grow our membership as well. And then take a look at programming. I don't know, bring in some funky, fun, interesting things that are going to shake things up a little bit.
There are also so many, people, I think I said this at the top, some people view, we do Daily Memphian and then back to the old Daily News have done events of various types there. We did our 125th anniversary at the Daily News there. We've done business seminars there since COVID. There are lots of business type events that are luncheons and evening things that are in what's the hall? Harden Hall. Other people maybe go there often for weddings. It's whether they're outdoor, or there's the relatively new cool space or spaces. Or there's at least one new space built back in there that's very cool and different. So, how do you go through your list of things to do today or this week, and you're going from what do the wedding planners want? What do the chambers of commerce want? What do the families want? What do the people who come from music want? It's a really interesting set of conversations and decisions you have to make on any given day, week, or month.
So true. It sounds like our senior staff meeting every Wednesday.
Yeah, right.
But that's what is so joyful about having such a passionate, experienced team. So, we have department heads of all those things that you just named. And we get together in a room and we work it out. Now, again, beauty at 96 acres. You can do multiple things at the same time. And so our rentals division, they're going to take a look and see what's the most rentable spaces. How can we get corporate groups in? How can we get, weddings happening? And what do you need? And I'm supposed to be and will be their best resource to get what they need to do their best job. At the same time, we're looking at programming. We've got an amazing group of educators that are coming up with the most interesting things I've ever seen for kids to learn and experience nature at its best. So that's another really important thing for us. As you mentioned, 40,000 kids a year. We are one of the top gardens in the United States in terms of the number of children that we serve. I want to increase that number. There are many more kids that have not been there. And, a lot of kids, green spaces are becoming a rarity. We're lucky in Memphis. We've got Shelby Farms. We've got Overland. We've got so many great spaces. Yeah. But a lot of cities don't. And I'm a real believer in environmental education. You don't get that in the classroom as often as you should, if at all. And so we're here to fill that gap.
Well, there's also... And my kids are older now, but even when my kids were younger, I remember the stats coming out of even kids with access to green spaces, be it their yard or a nearby park, or their family has the money to go anywhere they want. They don't. There's more stranger danger. There's more screen time. There's all these other draws that mean that kids get outside less and less. And then COVID happened. And so it even more so. So how do you compete with everything from screens to these fears people have to post-COVID sort of, huge changes in our behaviors?
That's a great question. And during COVID...
And you were in California.
I was in California, right.
Yeah.
During COVID, it was an interesting phenomenon that happened, in that a lot of people that had never been to a botanic garden before experienced it for the first time. Yeah. Because I can use California as an example. South Coast Botanic Garden, where I came from, we were one of the few places that remained open. We did not close for one day. And it was tough in LA. They were shutting down things left and right. And when the beaches shut down, it was a wrap. I saw people that came to the garden because they just needed to be outside. Yeah. And we kind of pivoted quickly and talked about that because, everyone, the mayors, the governors, the administration was talking about the benefits of nature. And so I saw exponential growth across the board with botanic gardens. And now our responsibility is to kind of keep that going. And so to your point, these people that had never been to a garden before realized this is a safe, green space where I can experience nature. These kids were coming out and many times realizing, oh, this is where I live. I remember Desert Botanical Garden, kids would get off the bus, we'd round them up, get going for the school tour, and we'd say, who lives in the desert? And no one would raise their hand because they're surrounded by concrete, they're surrounded by buildings, and to your point, screens.
Yeah.
And so they, for the first time, realized how they fit in this greater space. And I always like to say, you teach kids about nature, they'll respect it, they'll protect it. So we have to grow this future advocacy for.
With a few minutes left, we mentioned some of the other great outdoor spaces. There's also Dixon Gallery Gardens right across the street from you, all the various parks, the green, in the time I've been here, and George Abbott and I talked about it with the Civic Commons notion of just the increase in public spaces over the decades. I've been in Memphis almost 30 years, so we have bike lanes now, we have the Green Line, we have the Wolf River Greenway being expanded, all these different, really cool stuff happening over at Kennedy Park. When you look at all that, and again, as you were applying for the job and then getting the job, do you look at those both as, there's some amount of competition and some amount of opportunities for collaboration, or how does, from your point of view, Memphis Botanic Garden fit in this little, ecosystem of these groups, all of which, and I'm leaving out Mosh and Lichterman, and I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, so I apologize to everyone who I've left out. But how do you balance collaboration and competition? Because at the end of the day, you got to get people and you got to get members and you got to get donors, but also it's not a completely cutthroat for-profit business. So how do you balance all that?
I'm so happy you asked me that question because I can remember during my job interview with our board and with the search committee, I'm coming from LA, remember? And one of my questions to them was, well, who do you consider our competitors? And I'm so proud of our board members and the fact that they looked me straight in the eye and said, well, we don't really have competitors, we have collaborators. And I thought, wow, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Then I got here and I realized that's very true. Memphis has a very interesting thing going on that, yes, we may compete for donor dollars and funders,
sure, but
Memphis is a very philanthropic community. They try to make sure that they support all of these things that are important, all those places that you named. And what we have a responsibility for, and what I really want to take a charge with, is to collaborate with every single one of those places that you named. We're already doing a lot of that. I'm meeting with folks at the Dixon. We're talking about how we can collaborate and grow our plant collections to even higher heights because we're stronger together.
Yeah.
I've had meetings with Zoe at the Brooks. We have an amazing piece of art from the Metal Museum that's on short-term loan. So we're able to kind of talk about that museum while people are in the garden and vice versa. So I'm looking at it as these partnerships that we can kind of thread things together because I'm going to be the garden. That's my core competency.
Sure. Right.
But, there's nothing that says I can't do something that beautifully complements an art exhibition that Zoe may have at the Brooks.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like the mobile shell, and you may have gotten to that point, but this mobile shell they have that you see around town at various things. It used to be the shell was, this iconic place only in Overton Park. And that to me is one of these examples of collaboration where they'll do 50 something, I can't remember, we just had the executive director on, but how many events they'll do with the mobile shell around the city and any given to bring music to people. All that is really an interesting and new phenomenon. A couple more questions. LA, is that where you're from?
No, I'm originally from Ohio.
From Ohio, okay.
Yes.
But then 20 plus years in LA.
Well, no, most of my career was spent in the Southwest and West.
And the West.
So my garden work was in Phoenix, was in LA, and I was in San Diego. So I haven't been in this part of the country for a really long time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool for me too. My staff teases me now because I'm completely geeked out on the trees here. Because when you think about it, I was in the desert and I had a lot of palm trees, right? But I got back and I realized just how much I missed these amazing tree canopies. trees. And I'm telling you, Memphis has some of the best.
Yeah.
So oftentimes you'll find me, if I'm outside in the garden, I'm in the middle of the Woodlands area, just looking at the trees.
Yeah. It is still amazing. We're sitting here on the 10th floor of Crosstown. And if you look north from Crosstown, it's like we're in a forest. I mean, you see a few things sticking up through those trees, but it's striking every time I look that way. If I stood up and turned around, we could do that. And then the South, how's that? And I say this to somebody who came from Tacoma, Washington. So I was Tacoma, Washington, outside Seattle and Alaska, a little bit in Northern California. Then went to school and lived in Connecticut and New York. So I'm an adopted, this is definitely my adopted home. But the South was strange the first couple times I was here. I mean, to say the least. But I've come to really love it.
I feel like it's right place, right time for me.
Yeah.
Again, I vacationed every summer as a kid from the time I could walk until I left for school in Tennessee.
Oh,
now,
wow.
Granted, not Memphis, Gatlinburg, Smoky Mountains. I'm going to date myself, but I went to Dollywood when it was called Gold Rush Junction. So I was familiar with Tennessee from that perspective. And so to come full circle back, and trust me, I have folks in LA going, you're moving to the South? I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, there's an authenticity here that I am really enjoying.
Yeah.
Both from a work perspective and just personally.
Yeah.
I intentionally decided to move downtown because I'm here by myself, and I figure I want to be able to walk to places. I really want to get a feel for the city, so that's been fun. And everyone I've met, the one thing I can tell you is I meet them, and people go, okay, if you need anything, give me a call. Yeah. You get that in LA, and no
but they
one
don't
needs
mean
that. Here, when they tell you that, when they see you the next time, they're like, "Were you okay? Because you didn't call me."
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, again, New York, the Northeast. I mean, again, great people and lots of stuff. I was just up in New York this weekend. Love being there. Love leaving every time I leave. And people just aren't as nice in the Northwest either. It's not that they're unfriendly. It's just it's not like this. It's just very different. Last question I always ask people, because WXR is fundamentally a music station, which is, what was the first concert you ever went to?
Oh my gosh, you're really going to make me date myself, aren't you?
Well, it could be a reunion tour.
Okay. Prince.
Oh, nice. That's great.
Yeah, that was a good show.
Was that in Ohio?
That was in Ohio, and I was in the third row.
Wow.
With my then boyfriend.
Yeah.
I remember wearing high heels about 5 inches high. Can't do that anymore.
I've never been able.
His shoes were higher than mine, so that was kind of cool.
That's a good one.
That's my first show, so
that's very cool.
Resonated for sure.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate it. That is all the time we have this week. MaryLynn Mack, she's the new executive director of the Memphis Botanic Garden. You can search for Memphis Botanic Garden, see all these things coming up. What's starting on this Friday is?
Day after Thanksgiving, this Friday, is Holiday Wonders.
And that runs through?
December 28th, selected nights.
Okay, and then a big exhibit in the spring, the Trolls exhibit that people need to be looking for. But again, go to the website. There's always 1,000 things going on there. But that is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the episode, you can go to the Daily Memphian site, WYXR, or wherever you get your podcasts and get the full episode. Thanks very much. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.